This is an excerpt of and you can find various clips and tweets, and I'm scrolling through my Twitter timeline or my Facebook timeline of posts from politicians who are particularly in the right wing, who are talking about mental health all of a sudden after a school shooting, saying that this is the cause. The problem is not what they had access to. It is mental health issues that this person may or may not have been experiencing, but that would be the solution. So just a quick, this is an excerpt from the American Psychiatric Association titled, it's a publication titled Gun Violence and Mental Illness. The overall contribution of people with serious mental illness to violent crimes is only about 3%. Mass shootings by people with serious mental illness represent less than 1% of all yearly gun-related homicides. In contrast, deaths by suicide using firearms account for the majority of yearly related gun-related deaths. So laws that target, going with the research here, and there's plenty of, I can put the link in the show notes for you guys to check out if that's something you need to do, but laws that target 1 to 3% of the perpetrators of gun crimes, that's hardly even scratching the surface. It sounds like a reasonable response to say we need to address the fact that this shooter had a mental illness. And every time there's a school shooting, it just seems, we're so used to hearing it. We're so used to doing all of this, right? But we're so used to hearing this line that it's pretty much unquestioned now. And it sounds like a reasonable response, but you get into the statistics, and people with mental illness, and particularly people who experience daily mental health symptoms, aren't committing the overwhelming majority of gun crimes. They're just not. Also, people with maybe personality disorders, such as narcissistic personality disorder, an inflated self-grandiosity, lack of empathy, never-ending drive towards adoration and praise, and antisocial personality disorder, a limited sense of developmentally appropriate morality. Those are often, people with those are often less likely to seek treatment, either seek it in the first place or to follow the necessary rules to remain in treatment. They may not respect the rights of others in group therapy. Their attendance might not be consistent for therapy. They might feel like they don't have a problem, or that other people are their problem, and it doesn't last. And while I do like the sound of politicians feeling like they're experiencing some type of pressure or need to boost mental health treatment as a national priority, that's great. We've seen that as mostly empty rhetoric, however. It's a passing diversion from talking about limiting access. The president is not the only example, and it's kind of a moot point to obsess over hypocrisy from someone who sees truth as only being valuable as a means to a self-promoted end. But in a certain sense, he's a great example. He called to tackle the difficult issue of mental health in his kind of press conference after this most recent shooting, while offering zero legislation, zero new funding sources, zero initiatives to boost awareness and combat stigma or barriers to mental health treatment. He's actually rolled back laws that limit access to people with known significant mental health conditions. His tweet of the day of so many signs that he was mentally deranged. So So what are we supposed to do with that statement? What does mentally deranged even mean? Right? How is that helpful? Narratives where people with mental health issues are social pariahs liable to snap and violently attack you at any moment. It's naive at best, but it's definitely dehumanizing. And if you're receiving signals that society is going to blame you for the problems that you didn't cause, you're going to trust people less. And if you trust less, you're less likely to feel like you can safely seek help for mental health treatment that you might need. And if we stigmatize mental illness, funding for these services is far less effective. And we hear words like crazy, deranged, maybe lone wolf, or whatever. What messages are we sending? If someone calls you crazy or deranged or retarded throughout your life, what beliefs are you going to form about yourself? I mean, schizophrenia specifically has often been referred to as a mental illness that can lead to violent behavior. And while I've worked with a lot of clients through the forensic system that have committed horrendous atrocities, often in conjunction with substance use, but they're, once medicated, some of the most peaceful, unassuming, otherwise integrated individuals who have sort of a legal mandate to take their medications in order to stay out of maximum security prison. Again, statistically, this is an absolute minority of cases. There's also some troubling elements to the history of this talking point. There's an article in the American Journal of Mental Health that recounts, in the 1960s and 70s, by contrast, many of the men labeled as violent and mentally ill were also, it turned out, black. And when the potential assailants of a crime were black, U.S. psychiatric and popular culture frequently blamed black culture or black activist politics, not individual disordered brains, for the threats such men were imagined to pose. Such associations were particularly prevalent in the decades surrounding the release of the DSM-2. For instance, writing in the Archives of General Psychiatry, Bromberg and Simon described a protest psychosis in which the rhetoric of the Black Power movement drove, quote, Negro men to insanity, leading to attacks on, quote, Caucasians and anti-white productions and attitudes. Let's see. And Raskin wrote that blacks with schizophrenia rated higher than whites on a set of hostility variables because of the delusional beliefs that their civil rights were being compromised or violated. Brody problematically argued that growing up as a Negro in America may produce distortions or impairments in the capacity to participate in the surrounding culture, which will facilitate the development of schizophrenic types of behavior. And Vitals, whatever, linked the finding that incidence of hallucinations was significantly higher among Negro schizophrenics than among white schizophrenics first admitted to the state hospital system, to the possibility that there are factors in the Negro culture that predispose to more severe schizophrenic illness. So you have that sort of historical background of schizophrenia, being used as a way to sort of explain away African American political movements in a very sort of twisted way. So there's a history behind this whole mental health diversion, and it's pretty troubling, actually. So let's either invest in mental health as a societal priority, or let's be very clear and honest about why we're not, and why it doesn't matter because it's not your kid who deals with X. But despite scant evidence that mental illness is the primary concern for all these mass shootings, if you want your representatives, the public intellectuals, your community leaders, to prioritize mental health and substance use treatment, don't let them off the hook for just giving lip service. Show us with your legislative paper trail that you believe mental health is the problem.